Greetings, nerds. This is SNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont. And with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
I didn't wear green, so.
I didn't either. And I just realized it was 2 minutes ago when I was on Twitter.
Yeah. It's between that. Yeah, I guess the day Twitter has been like a mix of St. Patrick's Day, the NCAA tournament, and like NFL free agency, at least as far as like if you just don't have your trend, if you just do just default US trends.
Yeah. Well, you just said a lot of stuff, and I'm like, okay, sure.
Yeah,
I didn't realize all of that was going on either. Okay. Busy March it is. Man, I feel like it's not as though a major news dump happened, but I do feel as though this past week, since we last recorded, we've been getting a parcel here and there of things. The one that threw me the most, just because this actor, I will always associate with Vampire Diaries and a specific brooding vampire on that show by the name of Stefan Salvatore. So I am curious, like this casting news has me curious, Will, to actually watch another Star Trek show. But it was announced that Star Trek Strange New World will have Paul Wesley from the Vampire Diaries to play Captain Kirk in the show's second season.
Yeah.
Very, very thrown by that.
Yeah, I know you watched the Vampire Diaries. I did not, so I'm not familiar with his work in that show at all. But yeah, Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, which the first season will premiere in May, already has been given a second season, and this past week, either I don't know if it was a situation where Paramount planned on announcing this casting, or if their hand was forced, because apparently they don't, they have the same set security that a lot of these studios have, which is like the bare minimum, especially in the social media environment. And some people took some photos of Paul in uniform with some of the cast, and so of course there was some speculation about who is this, and so they thought one Trek podcast to listen to thought it might have been Captain Commodore Decker, who's a character from the original series, and then other people were like no, look at because look at the rank stripes, and it's indeed Captain Kirk. And then of course they did officially announce that he is cast as Captain Kirk for the show's second season. Now I don't know if it's a regular, because Anson Mount, who is phenomenal as Christopher Pike in this series. I mean, I know Bruce Greenwood did a great job in the Kelvin movies, timeline with Chris Pine, but Anson Mount has just like made this character his own. And whenever they announced this spinoff from Star Trek Discovery, where he first showed up as Captain Pike, who was the predecessor to Captain Kirk, my geekdom just exploded. Because he was just so phenomenal in that show. So Kirk in the original series, and I'm wondering how they're going to like deal with this with continuity, because in the original series with William Shatner, there was a line in one of the one episode where Kirk and Pike are together. He said that he only met Pike one time when they did the transfer of command with the Enterprise. So I'm wondering if this is just a one-off with Kirk showing up, or if this is like a flashback, or is he in command of another ship? I know some of the beta canon and some of the books, Kirk commanded another ship before the Enterprise. So I'm just really interested in seeing how they're going to honor continuity, having him show up in the second season of the show.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
People who will not be showing up in shows, surprisingly, it was announced that in Star Wars. No, that's not the piece of news. I thought you were going to talk about how isn't Darth Maul cut from Obi-Wan?
Yeah. So Darth Maul, apparently there's a lot of back and forth about this. So there was a story earlier in the week in the Hollywood Reporter that said that the Lucasfilm, when they were initially drafting the script for Obi-Wan Kenobi series, which is dropping also in May, was going to include Darth Maul. But then apparently Favreau and Filoni got consulted, and they were like, no, you don't need to include him, because, you know, they thought that, one, it was going to be repetitive of a storyline that was in Rebels, which I'm still working my way through. Great series, by the way. And also some other bits of animated canon and other things. So they were like, no, we don't need Darth Maul in this series. But then Lucasfilm came back and they're like, no, we never intended on having him in the series. It was always going to be Darth Vader as the big bad. And they basically called bullshit on this story from the Hollywood Reporter. And even another person, not only the studio did it, but apparently I was listening to Christian Harloff today when he was talking on The Big Thing. Apparently even the another person went to their personal Twitter who's tied to the studio and was like, this is complete and utter bullshit. Then there was never any intention for Darth Maul to be in the series. So long and short of it, he's not in the series, but there's a whole lot of back and forth about whether he was in there to begin with or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Still looking forward to that show. May is going to be a pretty awesome month of content for sure.
Totally.
What else is going on? Moving over to some Marvel news. The first Miss Marvel trailer dropped this week. I was not mad at it.
Yeah.
It was cute.
Mm-hmm.
It was charming. The girl casted as Miss Marvel, a lot of what she was doing, like it wasn't anything. There's something endearing about her.
Yeah.
Right off the get-go, and that I like. And I don't know. I'm curious about this series. Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious. I mean, this was a fun trailer. I mean, I think having the weekend, the soundtrack was just really well cut. Like, because like I wasn't sure exactly what we were going to get with this series. I know we saw some of the still photos, from paparazzi. I guess about a year ago or something like that. I guess when they were in production, and you know how those photos are. They're just raw. Somebody took it with their camera phone, maybe. So, but I didn't know what to make of the series. But I mean, I haven't read hardly any of the Miss Marvel comic books. I mean, I'm familiar with Kamala Khan as far as, she was the first Muslim superhero, and I knew she was a polymorph, and I know a lot of people are having some issues about some of the her powers, in the show versus what they are in the comics. But I think for multiple reasons they probably adapted it, because maybe it's just the polymorph powers weren't translating well into live action, and there might be some other like in continuity stories that we'll probably get in the series. But I just really liked the trailer. I liked the way they leaned in hard. It was not ashamed about her background. Mm-hmm. I mean, the line that's, it's like, girl of color from Jersey, brown girl from Jersey, not going to be a superhero, not taken seriously as a superhero. I'm paraphrasing, but, with that and, the scenes of her, in her, she's Pakistani, so American. So, all the cultural references there, her bangles and how they interwove her bangles as far as into manifesting their powers as well. So I really, really like that. I know, and I think that shows to some of the behind the scenes part of the show. Really, developing and drafting a lot of things about this character too, because I think that, so I'm glad to see that translate into the screen as well. So I think it's going to be a fun series. I did get I couldn't help but start, already starting to think ahead, like, how are we going to compare this to, like, say, Stargirl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
and Naomi, yeah.
Production is going to be different because you got MCU behind one show and CW behind the other.
Yeah. But I will say Stargirl, has not fallen, into the CW trap, which is why we really enjoyed it so much.
Right. What else? Euphoria's Sydney Sweeney has been cast to play opposite Dakota Johnson in Sony's Marvel pick Madame Web, although we don't know who she's playing, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. It's just, So I have no speculation as far as who it could be.
Black Cat. She's going to play Black Cat.
Yeah, you're right. That's it.
We've all seen the, I saw it weeks ago and I was like, yep. That's who she. This actress is going to find, like, if she gets this role, and if it pops, and maybe one other, then she can start being, going on the up and up. Yeah, she's very interesting. So we'll see. Cool. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And then Marvel does something really good, besides, all of the content.
Yeah. Yep.
They have spoken out against the Don't Say Gay legislation in Florida.
Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of people probably seen this legislation, which working its way through the Florida legislature, where there is, to have a bill that basically is restricting prohibits the classroom discussions on LGBTQ and gender identity and sexual orientation. It's been dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill, even though the actual text of the bill doesn't say that. The word gay doesn't actually show up in there, interestingly enough, but it's definitely captured. But I think Don't Say Gay is it's been dubbed that because that's sort of the intent of it, and a lot of people have spoken out about it. I know Disney ran into the crosshairs with their CEO Bob Chapek not coming out very forcefully to begin with, and he had to issue an apology. And I know a lot of employees at Disney are staging some walkouts and other stuff. And then, of course, Marvel Studios, which is a part of Disney, issued a very good, strong word, spoke out about the bill on their various platforms. And I'll just read it real fast. It's not that long. We strongly denounce any and all legislation that infringes on the basic human rights of the LGBTQIA plus community. Marvel Studios stands for hope, inclusivity, and strength, and we proudly stand with the community. Today we pledge to continue our strong commitment as allies who promote the values of equality, acceptance, and respect, end quote. So good for Marvel.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Good for Marvel. I feel like a little trailer, little trailer dropped over the weekend. It was called The Boys season 3. And it looks like Butcher has powers.
Yeah, it looks like Butcher took some Compound V.
Okay, yeah. And just watching the trailer, you're just like, yep, this is The Boys.
This is bonkers and as out there as not safe for work trailer as it could be.
Jensen Ackles looks so good at the end of that. Like, we're ready. And he already looks like he's having fun. Already that impression. And it's what we've talked about with Homelander in the past. We despise this character. He's awful. He's atrocious. There's something about Anthony Starr, though, that the way he plays him, there's like this like little ounce of just Like, oh, come on, Helllander.
Yeah.
Come
Yep.
on. I don't know what it is.
It's you're right. It is something I don't know if the word is endearing, but it is. But it's sort of It's like it's the character you gotta hate, but you're right. It's just something you just like have that moment where like, oh, it's just like this sweet man, but he's an evil bastard.
Yeah. You're just like, if only circumstances would be different.
Yeah. Yep.
Things would be different for him, and that's what you want in your villains. Yeah. You don't want cookie cutter absolute evil, or just somebody who it's like, okay, why haven't we locked them up yet? It's only 3. So definitely looking forward to that. And on that note, I've actually been watching a lot of TV lately. I'm caught up on pretty much most of the shows. I've finished some shows.
Cool.
And I'm caught up on Picard. I know you want to talk Picard because we can talk.
Yeah, we can talk Picard, or we can hit some of the other quick little hip.
No, we can talk Picard.
Okay.
So okay. Well, I can't emphasize this enough. You're brief introduction to Q and who he is and what his dynamic is with Picard.
All right. So the quick elevator speech about who Q is for folks who are new to Trek or casual Trek fans. So Q was the first antagonist that was presented in the pilot of Star Trek Next Generation. And so the episode was Encounter in Farpoint, and he first shows up on the bridge, and he goes through. He basically sees humanity as a savage race, and he takes Picard and the crew of the Enterprise to a 21st century court to put humanity on trial. And throughout, so basically Picard said, well, if you're going to, we'll test us to see if your theory about us is correct. And so that spun 7 years of Q showing up in various episodes of the Next Generation, testing Picard on various things. So the end of the series, Q takes Picard on this one big final test, and then takes him back to that same 21st century post-atomic horror courtroom, and basically Picard, they have their parting words and parting moments, and Q says to Picard in that moment, "The trial never ends." Which, fast forward to season 2, episode 1 of Picard, that same line is spoken at the end of the very first episode. So that's essentially their relationship. They've had, Q has shown up in other shows in the Trek universe as well, but his primary relationship and is always has been with Jean-Luc Picard. And his primary fascination with humans has always been Jean-Luc Picard.
But what is he? He
is a godlike entity.
Godlike entity.
Yeah.
So he's Star Trek. Got it.
Yeah. He exists in a extra dimensional realm called Q Continuum.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, where's the time cops when you need them? And it sounds like. Fast forward to episode 3 of season 2, what Raffi says to Picard is also true. That even though Picard is always playing defense, he's still playing the game just as much as Q is setting it up.
Oh yes. And that's and throughout their interactions throughout the Next Generation, that was always the case. Whenever actually Q was responsible for introducing the crew of the Enterprise to the Borg in the second season, and prior, the Borg were on their way to um, the Sector 001, which is Earth, to begin with. But then Q, in their usual back and forth, Picard, blusters to Q about we're ready for anything, and Q is like, "Well, are you?" And he snaps his fingers and puts him in the first contact with the Borg, and it does not go well, to say the least. And this is not when Picard was assimilated, though. But it did introduce the Borg to the next generation, and hastened their approach to Earth.
Right. And it's interesting because in this first episode, Q shows up at the end, but before that, we do get introduced to a Borg queen.
Yep.
And then that's when we're transported into the dystopian future or timeline, so to speak. That it would be an alternative timeline.
Yeah. So with that first episode, there were a lot of, obviously great Easter eggs. There was a new Stargazer, which that was Picard's first command, actually, the original Stargazer. And so, it was, the thing about this series that it leans so heavily into Trek lore, and even the first episode was titled Stargazer. And we get that. And the other really interesting thing about the first episode that I think one of the things that really stood out to me in that first episode is Picard's relationship with his mother and father, and why he is so closed off when it comes to committed relationships, or committed romantic relationships, I should say. In that, Picard, throughout the history of the Next Generation, he's had a lot of flings, but when it came to a committed relationship, he was always guarded. And then in this episode, it really touches on the fact that it looks like Picard's mother was a victim of spousal abuse. I mean, when you see all those things that were happening there at the Picard Chateau in France when he was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course Guinan really pushes Picard on that point when they were at her bar in 25th century Los Angeles, and he kind of he locks up. And then also whenever he was with Laris, the Romulan worker on his chateau, who was around for the first season. Actually, she was married. I guess her husband died in between the two seasons. But they were, again, he was open to a romantic relationship, but he raised the shills.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at the end of the episode, there's a split in the time continuum.
Yep.
And then they get transported into this dystopian alternate timeline. Surprisingly, we only stay there for one episode.
Yeah. It was, the first two episodes was a lot of setup for this season. But what a setup. I mean, getting back to Q, and we get him at the end of the very first episode. He ages himself so he can, look like Picard. and he's like, the trial never ends. And they start, then we get to the first few minutes of the second episode, and, the whole back and forth about, and like you pointed out, to Rafi's point about Picard possibly being responsible for the dystopian universe that they're in now, or the dystopian timeline that they're in now, and how, like, and the other thing too, what I really liked about that was they didn't do like a straight up. Typically, when they've done the alternate timeline stuff in Star Trek, they go to what's called the mirror universe, where it's just a 1-to-1 swap. Basically all the elements are there. There's the Enterprise. There's, people are the same roles, etc. Here, I mean, he's like General Picard. You're xenophobic, and he's a conqueror. I mean, he's like they had like the trophy room of like, it was like a who's who of like Star Trek lore as far as name drops people that he killed in this dystopian future.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I mean, even Seven, she finds herself the president and human.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which so it also is interesting, especially it comes up more in the third episode of how not all of the changes necessarily have been bad.
Yeah, exactly. So there was that. Rios is, he is captain of another ship, and Rafi, I guess she's like the head of security, and Elnor is like a terrorist.
Yeah. What is the name of that girl from the first season, the main character?
As far as Agnes, or
Nope. There was another one. First season.
Soji. Oh yeah, Soji.
Yeah, Soji we saw in the first episode.
Yeah.
I'm curious when we're gonna see her again.
Yeah. I'm curious if we'll see her at all in subsequent episodes this season, especially given that they're going back in, spoiler alert, back in time.
Right.
How that could work, unless it's later in the season, or maybe we'll see her in season 3. I know they just wrapped the third and final season production, I think this week. So maybe she won't show up in this season, but maybe she'll return in the next, depending on how things go with this one.
The other character that they pick up along the way is another Queen Borg, who was actually being held captive, about to get her head cut off, totally detached from the collective, in a very vulnerable state. But she is serving as somewhat of a key for them, and actually helps them go out into the past, where they have to fix time to make everything right in the future. And I found that interesting, that I was actually thinking, oh, it's going to be Soji, but no, it was her. And I was like, okay, yeah. It makes sense in a way. And I foresee a very Circle-like story coming about, but we'll see. Third episode, speaking about Agnes, Alison Pill really shined in the third episode for acting. I mean, granted, she was kind of given the platter.
Yeah, she was.
to be able to go inside the Borg Queen's mind and play all of that out. But I like how much we're very used to seeing Picard in that hero sacrificial way, but seeing someone like Agnes step up and actually even outsmart the Borg Queen at the end of it was really good. And I really so far like what they are doing with her character.
I completely agree with you 100% on what they did in the third episode. Even the second episode, when they were on the dystopian Earth, and just the little small beats, because I mean everybody else had sort of, with Seven, she now is president, which was like completely different from like her prior life as far as in the Prime timeline. Picard, pretty much, still leader, but Agnes, her changes seem to be like she's still the nerdy scientist.
Right.
She's still in the lab. It wasn't, instead of cloning people, now, she had created like the cat. I love the cat that she created, and there's a nice little nod to what they did with the work that she did with artificial life and robotics in the first season. and also with the sense that she created with Bruce Maddox.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing too is just how like to your point with the Borg Queen, how they use the Borg Queen very well as far as like setting up the whole how they're going to go back in time, and then and it touched on some things from the original series as far as like using the whole slingshot method and in a good tech way as far as explaining why they were able to tell the different timelines apart, and the Borg, Seven, utilizing her, still having her Borg knowledge, knowing how they could tell those temporal bubbles and why they all remained the same, and it could understand why they did it, and then of course having a big nod to Spock as far as like being the expert as far as being able to do it, and then then realizing no, the Borg Queen will also have that same technology and technical skill to be able to help them do this time travel jump. So what I'm really liking about this show, this second season, is they're really for hardcore fans like me, really digging in deep into a lot of the Easter eggs and a lot of the history and lore of the shows before. But I think for someone like you who's not as as a casual viewer who hasn't followed the series for all of its iterations, it's still accessible to you.
Yeah. I mean, it's perfectly fine. The first episode, I was very disoriented just because it's been so long since the first season.
Oh yeah.
The second episode, again, very surprised we only spent one episode there, especially, and it felt very much like, oh, this episode is just the lengthened trailer.
Yeah.
But now we're in the future, and I really like the third episode.
Mm-hmm.
I find fascinating everything they're doing with the Borg Queen and Agnes. Seven, there's some hints. I like the subtlety that's happening with Seven.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see that like her having an episode in the future of really standout moments and some decisions. Ralphie, I don't know. I'm like on the fence. Maybe it's because I haven't seen her in a while since the first season, but I feel like this, we're all sad Elnor's dead, but I didn't realize they were that close.
You know what? I had the same thing. I felt the same way when I was watching. I was like, when did
this happen?
Yeah.
What did I miss?
Yeah, and I know I freely admit I haven't rewatched season 1 of Picard, and probably since it first aired. So that's been like what, 2? It was the first year of the pandemic, so it's almost 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's hard to have sympathy in a relationship where you feel like you didn't really see the closeness occur.
Yeah.
I just think he got cast in a different show, but that's
no. It's actually there's two things I think is going on here. One is because to keep from having to do the in jokes that they've always had to do when they've gone back in time with Spock. It's an easy way to explain away. It's better. It's easier to put them on the shelf than trying to figure out every week how we can like figure out a way to keep Elnor from being discovered he's a Romulan.
Yeah. No, that makes sense as well.
Yeah. But he'll be back. I mean, it's Star Trek, so he's gonna, they'll fix the timeline. We'll see him at the end of the season.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that bothers me is that within 5 minutes of, oh my God, we just lost a crew member. This is devastating. Why aren't we killing the Borg Queen? It turned into, if we fix the timeline, then we can maybe bring him back. And I'm like, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So,
but no, it's so far so good. Very disorienting because Soji like appeared in one scene, and she was such a big part of that first season.
Yeah.
But I get it. This isn't called Soji. This is called Picard. He is an essential figure here. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I mean, and you're right. I know it would have been interesting if they had spent another episode or two on the in the 25th century dystopian timeline, but I think it set things up too well. And because I guess the other thing is you could run the risk of being there too long.
Exactly. I was just gonna say that it just I think it was. I'm not saying in a negative way.
Yeah.
It was just something that caught me off, like, very surprised by.
Yeah.
But in thinking back to the trailer, there were a lot of stuff where it's like, okay, well, that's not dystopian.
Yeah. That's not this show. Yeah. And
I like the momentum where like each of these 3 episodes very different.
Right.
Time and place. And so we're not spending too much time getting all the players in a single setting. We're not focused on too much setup. Right. It's just, no, we have to get going because we have a big plan in store.
Yeah, we got a big plan to find this Watcher. And I think the Watcher's got it. My betting thing right now, leader in the clubhouse is Ganon.
Yeah, whoever that. Sure, got it.
Yeah. So that's Whoopi Goldberg.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So, because she has a relationship with Q. She knows, she is Elorian, which they're long lived, and she could still be on Earth because an episode. There is a thing in the Next Generation where they also go back in time to the 1800s and early 1900s. I guess it was like late 1800s because San Francisco, and she was there with Mark Twain. And it explains how she and Picard first met to establish their relationship. So I think it's her. But it could be, but with Star Trek, it could be any number of people. It could be the Guardian Forever, again, personified. Who knows? But I like but you're right. It's well paced. And the other thing, and I'll close with this, is where I know they're dropping this week to week. The way this thing is structured, it would make for a very easy binge.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I always say that at the end of the season.
Yeah, but I'm seeing it now. Just the way things, especially the way they're like leaving things on like cliffhanger each week. Because this week, we have Rios and the whole getting arrested by the agents and with the whole immigration thing, and so again, they not to belabor the point, but they're bringing in some contemporary things in there, but also even in universe, there were some things in the mid 21st century that Earth was on the edge of oblivion, and so even in universe, they're like tying in a lot of those things to show how that dystopian future could have happened. So I like the way they're building that. We spent a minute there, but we're showing why it's so important to find this Watcher, because otherwise we're on the path to that future that we saw in episode 2.
Yep. Speaking about easy binges, Upload season 2 dropped over the weekend, and both of us have finished it. Because it's 8 half-hour episodes.
Yeah, 7. Not even 8. I was like, what? Yeah.
Maisel, I think, was 8
Yeah.
episodes.
Yeah, I think Maisel was 8. Yeah. Or is it 7? Yeah, I think it's. I can't remember. Still have to watch the last 2. So.
It was 8.
Okay, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Upload season 2. Another show. I feel like it's been 5 years since I watched the first season.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I was very disoriented during the first 3 episodes, and then as it went on, I was more engaged. Will they call the next season Download?
Maybe.
And are you jumping the shark?
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say, I'll,
it wasn't as good as the first season.
No, it wasn't.
No, because the first season, it was fresh, it was original, new world. They played a lot of their cards. This season, you could tell they didn't want to fall into. They didn't have more cards to play, so they tried to up the ante, and it didn't work. And for the life of me, I had no idea what was going on with Nora. I was like, where is she? What happened to her at the end of the last? What? Yeah. But then as soon as they told her, like, no, you can be our spy, I was like, okay, finally the show is starting to be normal again.
Yeah. It got back to its roots and the things that make that what really, because they had to force them apart so that because otherwise we would have 7 episodes of Nora and them going on and on and on with the relationship and how great they are and all that. But so they had to break them apart for a little bit. But you're right, it was a little disorienting because it was some kind of time, I forgot, between just the natural lapse of real time, and then within the show it seemed that there was some there was a time jump because Nathan was like frozen in 2G for a while. What was it, 2 months, I think, before Ingrid? Yeah. So a lot of so it was a little disorienting to get back into this world. But once they got to the whole point as far as what the goals of Freon and Coke and some of the other things, then then I got back engaged, and then of course they like ended the way they did. The 7th episode, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like in the middle, like this show, slow build, climaxed, and then kind of fell off. As like it was a weird season.
Yeah. Ingrid.
Yeah.
I mean, after a while, Ingrid was just grating. I mean, I was just like, I could do less with this character. I could.
Yeah. Another show that I binged was Marvelous Mrs. Maisel season 4. I can't say anything though because Will hasn't watched the last 2 episodes.
It's okay.
The last 2 episodes are my favorite episodes of the season.
It's okay. You can go ahead and say. You can binge it. Well, spoiler alert, folks. If you haven't finished it, I'm okay if you spoil it a little bit.
Okay. Well, I don't know what a little bit is. I also don't know what a true spoiler is. Here's what I'll say about Marvelous Mrs. Maisel season 4. Again, another show that returns, and it feels like 5 years since we've seen it.
Yeah.
Very disoriented.
Yes.
And then you get past the first few episodes, and some new characters start to come by. We finally make peace with Shy Baldwin and everything that happened in the previous season. And then I based that I love the last episode. And I the episode before it. This show works best when it's Midge and Lenny.
Okay.
When it's those two, their chemistry is off the charts.
Yeah.
The way the characters are, they finally have sex. So happy for them. But it is fascinating how even though they finally are intimate, what happens at the end of the season? Because there's a speech.
Yeah.
The actor who plays Lenny is always like, give me another Emmy. And he just gives this great speech. And he's worried that Midge is going to break his heart, but not for the reasons you would think. So on that note, what I will say is it took them 8 episodes to get there. But this season as a whole is just kind of a way of being like, it's kind of a bridge season.
Yeah.
We got to get from season 3 and how it ended to season 5, which is going to be end game for them.
Yeah. Which is time.
Right. I think, I agree. I think there was only ever so many stories they could tell with this character and this world.
Yeah.
But I'm really looking forward to the next season.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I felt as we were watching it, I just felt all the other characters seemed to have grown and changed, and Abe, Moish, even everybody, even Joel. Yeah. But Midge was just in the same place.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I've watched this before. I mean, in episode 5 with Shy and her, like, I was about done with the way they handled that whole non-apology apology.
Yeah. No. For me, I felt like everything was paid off at the end of this season.
Okay, well, I'll watch. I did make it, so I got to episode 6. I still have to watch 7 and 8, but you're right. I mean, anytime Luke Kirby is on, he's just, I just love him as Lenny Bruce, and the show just goes to the next level when Midge and Lenny are together. You're so right about that.
I'm so worried he's gonna die next season. I'm so worried, but it's gonna break my heart. So it did that. I surprisingly, I'm all caught up on The Flash, even though I could care less about any of those characters.
Yeah. I watched. I'm caught up as well. I know. So they had their first interlude episode, but basically a backdoor spinoff with Nora and Bart. And yeah, it happened. It was pretty much what I expected, which I didn't expect much, and I hate confirmation bias. God, when that happens, but
the actors who play those two characters. This is one of the few times I will criticize actors and their performances, because they are literally 20-year-olds, like mid-20s, late 20s.
Jessica Parker Kennedy's in her 30s. And
the characters themselves, maybe early 20s, but the way they act them, it's like they're children. And I'm just, this is not what. No, it's so annoying.
Yep. Yeah, I completely. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna do that, then just bring on actual kids. I'd just rather you do that instead of having a 30-something Jessica play like she's 15. And I think, or maybe
even have the characters themselves be 15 instead of early 20s, and like, hey, then act that. Why are you like you're still in high school? But,
I mean, I get it with Impulse. I mean, with Impulse, I get it because well, at least in the comic, Impulse was artificial.
I don't want any comic book excuse for it, Will.
No. Okay.
No comic book excuse for it. This is the TV show. Yeah. It doesn't make logical sense.
Yeah.
I hope the spinoff doesn't happen, but whatever.
Yeah. They're just setting up. They're setting up for if we have 20 plus episodes and Grant's only in 15 episodes next year. But I will say, So no more about the first episode. Even though I did, I mean, at least John Wesley Shipp, thankfully, is. I was happy to see him. I'm always happy to see Jay Garrick. But getting to this week's episode, it was entertaining for me. I will freely admit, I fast forwarded through the Frost stuff because I just don't really have any inclination to watch that character. I hate what they did with with Killer Frost. They should have had some guts back 5 seasons ago and really made her evil. That would have been a much better dynamic, I think, to play that, have that character be a consistent foil to Team Flash. But that's neither here nor there now. But with Barry and Kramer, the nitpick I'll have is, again, he tells everybody his identity. Why was he getting all into it about it again? But I did like that they had Scientist Barry, with how he was able to disable Goldface, who, Goldface is Goldface. But so I like those elements. I like showing how good a detective Kramer is, and was able to figure out he was indeed the Flash. But it was, I did enjoy that aspect of it. But yeah, like as we were talking off show last week about maybe the Flash will be one of those shows we just sort of pop in on. I think we just need to pop in on it every now and then.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then, so you've been watching Winning Time.
Oh yeah, it's so good. It's so good. Yeah. So yeah, have you had it?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So Winning Time is based off the book Showtime, which is about the Los Angeles Lakers, the Showtime Lakers of the 80s, and how Jerry Buss acquires the team from Jack Kent Cooke, how Magic Johnson is drafted, and of course Larry Bird with the Celtics, and really just goes into the building of the Showtime Lakers that really saved the NBA, because the league was really at a crossroads at that point in the late 70s, early 80s. Jerry Buss is played by oh my gosh, blanking on his name now.
Joe.
It's a great show. Gosh, I'm tired. Okay, I guess I'm tired of it. It just hit me all of a sudden. But yeah, it's a great show. Jerry Buss is played by, oh gosh,
I don't know why you're so fixated on it.
Yeah, I know. It's just like he's like well-known actor. He's like always plays off of Will Ferrell. But anyway,
people.
Yes, a lot of people, yeah. But yeah, I guess the reason why I'm blanking is because originally I do remember Michael Shannon was originally supposed to play Jerry Buss, but then in the show, they recast it. And so we have a new actor playing him, and also Jerry West, who was the coach of the Lakers at the time. He's not put in the most favorable light in the first couple episodes, but he and Jerry West is very notable because he's the logo for the NBA. Literally, his silhouette is the logo from when he played basketball. So yeah, so it's. It's a really, really good series on HBO, and should definitely check it out.
All right, will do. On that note, Will.
John C. Reilly, duh. That's why it's like, why could I remember his name? John C. Reilly, yeah. Plays Jerry Buss.
All right, and you guys can all congratulate Will because he remembered that name.
Yes.
On Twitter, go ahead and tell them where they can find you.
Yes, you can find me. Yes, and my brain fart there. See what happens when you try to analyze the Flash. It causes all your brain cells to die. But you can find me at Will M Polk, WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me on Twitter at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter at Scene and Nerd. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and visit our website, www.sceneandnerdpodcast.com. But most importantly, rate, follow, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.